Can you, there's a full screen button on the bottom right of the presentation. I'm using Prezi, by the way. That is a little small for people to see. Yeah, in the bottom right, there's a full screen button. There we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, Jim Dobra? No? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Honeysett. I'd like to share with you a vision I have and an initiative that I'm working on in Balboa Park, which in many respects is about trying to give context and meaning to a cultural park full of many cultural institutions and museums. And part of what I'm going to talk about is really the arguments and the philosophy that I'm using to try and help these museums think differently about themselves and put the visitor at the center of everything that they do. This presentation is available here. This is a bit.ly URL, so you can access it yourself. So I've called this a content commonwealth, which is about a collection of institutions and stuff put together for the mutual benefit. But also I have a kind of a working title, which is Lost in Balboa Park, and I'll explain how I've got to that in a moment. This is me. Contact details if you want to get in touch with me. So, Balboa Park, San Diego. San Diego is the southernmost city in Southern California. It's about 5 miles north of the Mexican border. That's where that blue dot is. And Balboa Park is a city park. It's about 1,200 acres, of which about a quarter of that is actually constituted by cultural organizations and museums. So that's about 250 acres or about 100 hectares of actual museum consolidated into a very doable in one-day space. To give you an idea, and I'm already missing the weather in Southern California, this is what Balboa Park looks like. This is a Spreckles organ, a massive outside organ in the park. This is the San Diego Museum of Art. And this is an iconic structure in the middle of the park, which is the California Tower next to the Museum of Man. There are 27 cultural institutions in the park, representing pretty much every discipline that you can imagine in museums. Science, history, theater, natural history, zoo, ballet, performance, railroad, photography. I mean, you have to... Traditionally, each of those institutions have thought about themselves as individual institutions, but my vision and the initiative that I'm working on is to help them think about themselves as this encyclopedic museum, a single experience, and really what does that mean for the visitor. So this is really the problem to solve. So my organization works with all the institutions in the park, helping them with IT support, in-gallery development, website production, website hosting, and digital strategy. And so I'm tasked with helping all these institutions kind of figure all this stuff out and move into the 21st century. And so what I'm trying to create is help them figure out what a unified visitor experience looks like and a unified engagement looks like for this kind of massive, think of it as a massive museum. So there are these kind of traditionally accepted tenets of creating digital strategies, which are about access and sustainability. But the conversation that I'm having with the institutions in the park is rethinking what they think about and how they imagine content. And I'm going to explain what I mean in this presentation about thinking about content more as an asset. Sustainability, there are a number of institutions in Balboa Park who are concerned with the physical preservation of the buildings. They are historic buildings, the physical infrastructure and architecture of those buildings, but nobody's really thinking about the preservation and the sustainability of the intellectual property. And again, that's part of my vision and initiative. But I also, and we rarely talk about and sully our conversation talking about business, but there is a business side of this. It is a park, it is, and most museums, particularly in the US, are tasked with bringing an audience into their museum. So I want to talk a little bit about that as a guiding principle, about how you kind of marry the virtual and the physical to generate traffic and physical visits. So I'm going to be talking about visits and revenue too. So let's, Uwe talked about this earlier on, about how meshing those two virtual and physical aspects of a cultural experience. So we do a great job in Balboa Park, we do a great job on the kind of physical side of it. You know, we're in this magnificent building, it's kind of very obvious that there is a building here. Balboa Park gets 12 million visits a year, which if that was an amusement park, it would be just below Disneyland in Anaheim and just above Epcot Park. So it's a significant, significant draw for visitors. But the challenge certainly for the 21st century institution is, if you want to be successful now, you've got to be as equally successful in your physical space and your physical engagement as you are with your virtual engagement. And sadly, Balboa Park is not doing a very good job of that. We have no single destination for content for the park, and really that's the crux of my initiative and vision is to create that. Because in the online world, this is kind of what we look like, completely indistinguishable from everyone else. And so the challenge is, how do you create visibility for your institution? So you as an institution, you have a website. What are you doing to make your website visible and stand out from the crowd? Because really the visibility in the online world is about relevance. And you've got to be relevant for your physical installation, your physical building, as much as your virtual. And so this is what my attempt is, to figure out how to raise the visibility in the virtual world of the park. So this is part of my argument with the museum directors, is to rethink how they think about content. So here's a bunch of examples of content that cultural institutions are generating. We've got social media content, video, we've got wall labels, we've got collection content, we've got blogs. And the challenge is, while we're doing a great job with images, and really because there's a business model around images, rights and reproduction, licensing, there is a defined approach to think about digital surrogates of our collection objects. We're defining content in terms of its delivery, about its destination. So you hear phrases, particularly from directors, who say, we need an app, or we've got to write a blog post. Instead of thinking more generically about what it means to provide interpretive content and collection information. And that's really the root of my argument with the directors, and getting them to understand how valuable content can be if you disconnect it from where it's going to be delivered, and how valuable, and really the value of that content as an asset is about its resonance, about its kind of stickiness with people, but also its number of uses. And this is a real powerful concept of not thinking about content in its final destination, but how you can use it in many instances. Right now, museums, we have these kind of three core applications: collections information, digital asset management, content management. But really, we need something that puts all those things together, which is a kind of a content as asset management system, and that's partly what I'm trying to achieve. And apologies to any physicists in the room, I have this kind of metaphor about thinking about transitioning from that kind of classic view of content, which is it's just in one place on your website, to a more kind of quantum field theory view of content, where it can exist in lots of many places at the same time. And that's really where we want to get to with engaging our content with our audiences. So in terms of the scale of what I'm dealing with in the park, this is what's coming out of these 27 cultural institutions. Annually, there's 4,000 performance and films that need to be captured, 150,000 volumes, 600,000 collection objects, 5.5 million photographs, 7 million specimens, and 120 million historic documents. The scale of this thing is massive. That's over 130 million discrete objects, And the objects on view, and many museums struggle with this, and Uwe talked about it and others this morning, not being able to put all your objects on view. There's maybe 13,000 objects viewable in Balboa Park, which is a tiny fraction of what's available. And really, the only way that we can provide access and exposure to those collection objects and that content is digitally. So, the number one challenge, and it's a challenge that most museums face, is we live in the age of scale. Facebook, Twitter, Facebook has the quarter of the population of the planet in there. We live in this age of scale where 1 in a million chance happens, a few times an hour. And really, what I'm trying to create is this destination website with all that content, because in the online world, content is like a fishing net. The more content you have, the more people you can attract virtually. Quantity will attract the people, but the quality of the content that you provide will keep them there and keep them coming back. So what does that mean? So traditionally, scale is about brute force. It's about an army of interns, and I have considered bringing in an army of interns to help me with this project. Intense in the park. But we're approaching an era where we're moving away from kind of manual brute force approaches. We've gone through kind of algorithmic approaches to, for example, language translation, to statistical analysis, which is much more successful. And I came across this service, this website, a couple of months ago called Clarify. And Clarify, part of providing access to all this collection object is to generate metadata, and generate metadata at scale, because that's what's going to grab people and provide connections between objects. And so basically, I took an image from the San Diego Museum of Art. This is an El Greco. I uploaded it to their service, and this is what it came back with in terms of metadata. It did a pretty good job, although I don't know what fruity means in this context. But the point is, there are many opportunities to actually scale up what we're doing and how we approach the generation of content. So let me go a little more detail into the kind of Commonwealth that I'm proposing. So there's really three aspects to this. One is information, one is engagement, and one is experience. So on the information side, it's creating a data layer. It's figuring out how to bring all these separate institutions up to provide a layer of data that represents their collections and their cultural holdings. And really, that then gives me an opportunity to preserve and sustain that from a digital point of view. The argument I'm having is, certainly with the directors, is there's all these different types of collection types, and the directors are saying, well, what's the common thread between all these seemingly disparate things? And really, it's the people. The people come to the park and they want to consume all this stuff. So that's really the common thread. So we have to put the visitor at the front of this. So part of one of the painful things for directors to understand is that in the online world, when people are researching for stuff, they don't really care where it is. They don't really care about your institution. They want to see stuff. So I want to create this environment that is institutionally agnostic, but provides this serendipitous route through the content, providing connections at scale that are going to align with everybody's interests. So I'll give you an example. I spent yesterday traveling, going around some of the churches, listening to the organs in some of the churches around. So let's start with organ music and just think about a connection between seemingly disparate objects. So organ music, you find out about organ pipes. And then you find out that the mechanical and pneumatic engineering for organ pipes is the same as locomotives. Locomotives, and actually that mechanical and pneumatic engineering is the same in flight simulators. That would lead you to maybe find out about aerodynamics, which would lead you to find out about birds, which would lead you to find out about flightless birds, and then dinosaurs, and then the Komodo dragon. Connections, a serendipitous trail through content. So the third layer of this, so you've got this institutionally agnostic view available to people in the virtual world, but then there's an experience of those things. So someone coming to the park is interested, let's rethink that content connection trail where you've got going from organ music to the Komodo dragon, and really that translates into a visit to the Spreckles organ, which I showed you at the beginning, the Railroad Museum, the Air and Space Museum, the Science Center, the Natural History Museum, which has birds and dinosaurs, and then finally the zoo, which has a Komodo dragon. Serendipitous experience of content, and vice versa. You could start at the zoo and end up at the Spreckles organ. And there are other institutions that can provide content to kind of flesh out all those meaningful things. And I'll just briefly mention the business side of this. So there is a unified pass to get into the museums, which traditionally have charged. You would have to, if you wanted to visit 3 museums, you'd have to pay 3 times at the 3 different institutions. So really what this is creating in the content world, this is creating a content layer that is going to drive traffic to the institutions and a single admission ticket. So that's kind of the 3 broad layers that I'm going for. There was a recent study done about called the phone stare. And what are people doing when they're queuing up for your exhibition and they're looking at their phones? You know, are they really engaged in your content? And it turns out that they are. Almost half the people who are engaging with their mobile device are actually looking for stuff about the stuff that they're about to experience. So this is my working model. How many people are familiar with Spotify? Excellent. That's lucky. I had a moment when I thought maybe hadn't reached Poland yet. So think of Spotify. Spotify is, and how that helps you engage with music. And so that's my working model, is use Spotify, allow the creation of playlists of content. Because Spotify allows you to search individual songs, you can organize stuff, your own stuff, you can link to other stuff, and you can discover and share and follow other people. So that's my working model for the content. I mean, it really is it's a metaphor that people are familiar with. It's a framework that allows you to, at scale, engage with something and get something out of it, and really create your own experience and discovery of music. So if you're familiar with Spotify, you'll be familiar with all these things. And then one of the more, as you think about the playlists in Spotify and how some are engaging, some of them are, particularly the moods where, you know, you want a sentimental playlist. You know, you could have a sentimental playlist of the park content. But also, a lot of people go to the park to work out. So you could have the aerobic playlist of collection objects in the park where, you know, they're all on the 2nd and 3rd floor, so you've got to go up all these stairs to consume and engage with them. So, another kind of thinking about the business side of this. So, creating a single destination website. So in the museum world, virtual visits and physical visits, there is a correlation between those 2 things. And any museum who is looking to create an online destination should benchmark at least as many virtual visitors as physical visits. That's really the benchmark that you should be going for. But many institutions are doing a great job of their online presence, and they are getting between 5 and 10 times as many virtual visits as online visits. So with 12 million visitors coming to the park, if we generate content at scale, we should be able to generate a website that's attracting 60 million visits a year. I know the Met, for example, 6.5 million physical visits and about 45 million virtual visits. Think about the power and what that can do in terms of a cultural destination website. But also there's another purpose for doing that. So in the e-commerce world, there's a concept of conversion. And that's when someone who's visiting an e-commerce site actually turns from researching or surfing into actually buying. So you might consider that there is actually, there's a 1% conversion rate. So 1 out of 100 people on Amazon, for example, are actually going to buy something. So you might consider a kind of a cultural version of that, which is converting 1% of surfers on your website to actually becoming a physical visitor to your institution. So if that were the case, 12 million physical visits, we should be able, if we took 1% of our 60 million visits, we should be able to increase park visits by around 6 million. And that's the moment when the directors finally get that there is actually a meaning and a business kind of model around this crazy idea that I have. How do we get there? This is what I'm doing right now, is raising some money. I know it's going to be extremely difficult and challenging. and it's going to take a long time with a lot of people. And my working concept is the kind of makeover concept, and I'm sure this extreme makeover is franchised in every country in the world. But really this concept of, and because I'm in this unique situation working with all these museums, of having this kind of makeover team that goes into each of the institutions and sets them up for the technical architecture, the technical training that they need in order to be able to get to a kind of a normalized level. So, Extreme Makeover, Balboa Park edition. I'll briefly summarize the architecture, which is really bringing all these institutions up to a normalized level. There are some institutions that have no technical expertise. We can provide that. Encouraging them to think about content as an asset, and then providing this kind of layer over it that is providing connection and meaning to all the content that is below it, with the visitor in mind. There are a whole bunch of standards that we can employ to be able to do that, and finally, worry about the delivery of this thing right at the end, to provide the delivery and access. And I think I'm just on time. Thank you very much.